What up, what up, what up? Welcome back to Pnoid News. Man, listen, so, I went in looking for some news today because I was like, I should probably make a video. Start like releasing content like every day again. So I came across this. I think this is kind of interesting in the aspects of. We've been talking a lot on Discord about how America's not capitalist. Right. And how, to be honest with you, the vast majority of Americans don't want capitalism. They want all the things that come from it, but they don't actually want capitalism. So we're gonna rock this out. Check this out. Biden sold off nearly half of the U.S. oil reserve. Is it ready for a crisis? An energy crisis spawned by a Middle East war 50 years ago spurred the U.S. to create a huge crude oil stockpile to shield the country from threats by unfriendly nations. Now, the oil lying in half-filled salt caverns along the Gulf Coast is posing a political quandary for President Joe Biden. The Biden administration sold off more than 40% of their strategic petroleum reserve last year to help limit rising fuel prices after Russia invaded Ukraine, leaving the stockpile at its lowest level since the early 1980s. That's fueling Republican accusations that Biden has left the U.S. vulnerable to disruption of global oil supplies at a time when Hamas terrorist attacks in Israel are stoking fears of a wider regional war disrupting fuel shipments from the Middle East. That's Joe Biden's fault for trying to lower prices of gas before the election. The House Natural Resources Chair Bruce Westerman told Politico. Earlier, former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy lamented to reporters that our strategic petroleum reserve is down to nothing. In fact, the reserve still holds 351 million barrels, equivalent to nearly 56 days of total U.S. oil imports last year. Though well below the peak of 727 million barrels it held during the Obama administration, that's on top of the 424 million barrels that private companies were storing in the U.S. as of early October. The administration has defended its handling of the reserve, saying it still holds ample crude to protect the nation's strategic needs and offer a cushion against stock price shocks. I'm not worried about the reserve levels at all, Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm told a House committee in September, adding it was the largest strategic reserve in the world, and the U.S. is no longer the energy beggar it was in 1973 when the Yom Kippur War prompted an Arab oil embargo against the United States that sent prices spiraling and left Americans waiting hours on lines at gas pumps. Back then, U.S. oil production was dropping while its thirst for fuel was rising, prompting Congress to pass a law in 1975 to create the reserve. 5 decades later, the United States is the world's biggest oil producer, which exports more crude than petroleum products and it imports. Its output is still at record highs and climbing even as its demand is flattened. All right. So, as you can see here from this graph, right, this is, how the graph looks, right? It's a graph. Everybody loves graphs. Okay, so here's the thing, and this is kind of important. Americans don't actually like capitalism, right? What they like is having like a whole bunch of stuff, right? They like having cheap plastic things, whatever, pick your plastic thing that you like, whether it's a cell phone or a microwave or, a refrigerator or whatever, stereo. I'm just looking at things around my fucking house at the moment, little toys for kids, whatever. You like having all these things, right? But you don't actually like having to deal with, the consequences of having like a capitalist system where you have to deal with like the geopolitical problems and all the nonsense and like the shocks to the system and things of this nature. And this is why like the Federal Reserve was actually brought up with in the first place, right? A lot of these things that we think of as being like really, really evil, right, are actually just results of us, of like the capitalists, like people on top going, listen, they're not going to keep letting us do what we do unless like we have a way of like protecting the people from like the ills of the bad shit that happens sometimes. It's kind of like when you have a car that, like a Ferrari or whatever, right? And it runs amazing, right? And it does like 220 miles an hour. But, sometimes it's going to break down, and it's going to have to go in the shop. And in the meantime, like all these people all of a sudden are going to be on foot, And that's what we did with the American economy. It's a Ferrari, right? It's amazing. It runs at the peak efficiency of what a car can run at, right? And it produces just all these beautiful noises and sounds and gives you all these sensations, and it's very hedonistic. But, nobody wants to be caught walking. So the issue is that you have to stand here and protect people from like having to walk. So you end up having to like have a bus beside it, right? And you're like, man, listen, we're slowing down our Ferrari by having this bus have to keep up with it all the time, and it's a pain in the ass. But this is like what the reality is of things, and this mentality is kind of dumb, right? In the end of the day, it is kind of dumb of thinking that like capitalism, communism, and socialism are like almost religious aspects to people at this point, right? They're not really like what they're supposed to be, because capitalism and like communism and socialism are just ways of distributing goods to human beings. That's all any of this really is. In the end of the day, that's is just ways of like the ways you distribute your goods and like give people things in the economy. They're not anything more than that, and that's an important thing to understand, because the way we think of it is we think of it as this like religious experience where it's like, I'm a capitalist, right? And it's dumb, right? And it's because capitalism is tied with liberalism, which is tied with like the individual. And in having that, the vast majority of people be much better under almost like a mercantilist system in the end of the day, because like we're supposed to be part of a tribe and a family, like you're supposed to be part of a community and a bigger thing that's more important than yourself, right? And that's how like every family is a commune, right? In the end, like when it really comes down to it, because you take care of your children, you take care of your wife, and you go hard and you grind it out. And it's not for you. That's not an individualistic thing. Even though we try to turn it into an individualistic thing, it's not. And we don't really have these conversations. We don't really talk about this type of stuff because it doesn't make any sense to like normal people, right? And everybody wants to stand here and be this individual and like basically be like full grown ass children. And that's dumb, because we're not children. We're adults, right? And adults, make sacrifices. And we think about like other people more than we think about ourselves oftentimes. That's not a bad thing. And the idea that like you're a broken person and you have all these like stupid mental disorders has nothing to do with like you having an actual problem. It has to do with like the society is broken around you. Like I just read a study the other day that said like 45% of US adults have, ADHD. If 45% of somebody has something, that's not a disease. What that is that's a trait. Right? Like listen, like more people have ADHD than have red hair or blue eyes. Think about that, right? Like legitimately, if this was anything the fuck else, right, that didn't have to do with like how you participated in the economy and like the ways that you acted, right, in like at work, like legitimately it would be called a trait. It would literally just be called like, yo, man, listen, like, 45% of people are not made for this, to do this way. Maybe we should change things. But no, instead we're going to go like, yo, we need 45% more medication, right? It's stupid and it's dumb and it doesn't work that way. But yo, look, man, I'm Tom P of Pnoid News. I wanted to bring this to y'all. I hope y'all enjoy. I'm going to holla at y'all later. Peace be like one. I'm out.